Welcome to Griffonomics.
Yeah, it is really great to be here.
Today, we are looking at a situation that I can really only describe as a high-speed car chase, where the driver is simultaneously trying to change the tires, upgrade the engine,
And outrun 3 different police departments at the same time.
Exactly. We are talking about HIMS and HERS today. And honestly, depending on which document you pick up from this massive stack of sources we have here on the desk, this company is either, the greatest healthcare success story of the decade, or they are about 5 minutes away from being regulated out of existence entirely.
It is a perfect storm. I really don't use that phrase lightly. You have company that just posted absolutely massive numbers, record revenue, incredible growth, and yet they are standing at what might be the single most dangerous crossroads in their entire corporate history.
It's a total tale of two realities.
Right. I mean, I have been analyzing companies for a long time, and I rarely see a divergence this wide. You've got the business reality, which is posting absolute blowout numbers, and then you have the legal reality, which is a combined, almost coordinated assault from the FDA, the DOJ, the SEC, and the biggest pharmaceutical company on the planet.
On one hand, you look at the 2025 annual financial overview, and you see revenue hitting $2.35 billion. That is up 59% year over year. I mean, they're just crushing it. But on the other hand, you look at the market, and the stock is tanking, short interest is at a 52-week high, and they have federal regulators breathing down their necks.
It is like watching a guy winning a marathon while sprinting through an active minefield. It is the very definition of a binary outcome.
So the core conflict we need to explore for you today is whether HIMS and HERS can successfully pivot from being what critics have labeled a GLP-1 weight loss factory into a legitimate, diversified, proactive care platform.
Or if the regulatory wall they just slammed into is going to stop them dead in their tracks.
And the stakes here are absolutely huge for anyone listening. This isn't just about whether a specific tech stock goes up or down. This is really about the future of telehealth as an industry. It's about the legal definition of what a compounding pharmacy is actually allowed to do in this country.
And whether a Silicon Valley tech company can actually outmaneuver Novo Nordisk, the biggest pharma giant out there.
Precisely. So our mission today is to generate a highly granular investigative report on what we are calling the compounding crisis. We've pulled together a stack of sources that is, frankly, pretty intimidating.
Yeah, we went through a lot.
We've got the Q4 2025 earnings transcripts, the 10K filings, which are just packed with interesting disclosures. We have SEC investigation letters, the actual lawsuits from Novo Nordisk, and all the press releases regarding their massive $1.15 billion acquisition of a company called Eucalyptus.
It's a fascinating case study in corporate risk management.
We are going to break this deep dive down into a few clear sections so you can follow along. First, we will look at the business model transformation. The good news, basically. Then we are going to look at the regulatory wall they hit in February 2026. We will dissect the legal attacks, the financial fallout, and finally, their great escape strategy involving this massive international expansion.
I think we have to start with the numbers, right? Because if you ignore the lawyers for just a second, this business is absolutely flying.
Let's jump right into section 1, the powerhouse numbers. Because the 2025 full-year revenue hitting $2.35 billion is no small feat.
Not at all. A 59% increase over the previous year is hyper-growth territory. And it's not just top-line fluff either. Their subscriber base has swelled to 2.51 million people.
And what really jumped out to me in the reports is that these aren't just window shopping subscribers who try it once and leave. They are paying more over time. Monthly revenue per average subscriber is actually up 11% to $83.
Right, which tells us they are getting more people through the door and extracting more value from each individual patient.
That is a critical metric for any subscription business. It shows sticky engagement. It tells us they aren't just acquiring customers who buy a cheap generic item once and churn out. They are successfully upselling them or moving them into higher value, more complex treatments.
It validates the stickiness of the whole platform, but I think the real star of the show here, arguably, isn't the HIMS side of the business anymore. It's the HERS phenomenon.
Let's talk about that, because the HERS brand grew over 100% in 2025.
It literally doubled in a single year. It is rapidly approaching a $1 billion annual run rate just on its own.
$1 billion,
Right.
Just the women's vertical.
Yeah. It now accounts for nearly 40% of their entire U.S. revenue.
Which is wild to think about, because I think a lot of people still think of this company as, the guys who sell hair loss pills and Viagra online, the bro brand.
That is definitely the old narrative. The data we are looking at proves they have genuine traction across demographics now. They are marketing to women incredibly effectively, expanding into dermatology, mental health, and hormone replacement. It proves the platform thesis that they can sell far more than just one type of pill to one type of person.
Why do you think that is working so well for them right now? Is it just the exact same marketing playbook but painted pink?
No, it is a lot more sophisticated than that. They tapped into a massive, glaring gap in the market regarding women's healthcare. If you or anyone you know has ever tried to get a specialized appointment with a dermatologist or a psychiatrist in the traditional healthcare system, you know it is an absolute nightmare.
Oh yeah, you were looking at months of waiting, really confusing insurance networks, inconvenient office hours.
Exactly. HIMS and HERS just digitized that access point. They proved they aren't just a lifestyle website, they are a legitimate access point for healthcare, especially for conditions that are often stigmatized or just ignored by general practitioners.
Now, there is another specific metric they keep hammering on in these earnings calls. Personalized offerings. They say personalized products now represent over 70% of U.S. revenue. Why are they leaning so hard on that specific word, personalized?
This is where we really have to read between the lines of these corporate transcripts. Personalization isn't just a fun marketing term for them, it is quite literally a legal shield.
A legal shield. How does that work?
Well, think about what compounding actually is legally. In the eyes of the FDA, a compounding pharmacy is supposed to make a custom medication for a specific patient because the standard mass market drug doesn't work for them.
Give me an example of that so we can visualize it.
Sure. So maybe a patient is allergic to a specific red dye used in a mass market pill. Or maybe a child physically can't swallow a large tablet and needs the pharmacist to create a liquid suspension. Or maybe an elderly patient needs a highly specific dosage that falls halfway between the two standard sizes sold by Pfizer or whoever.
Okay, that makes total sense. It's like getting a bespoke suit tailored for you versus just buying one off the rack at a department store.
That's a great analogy. But here's the major catch. You are not legally supposed to use compounding to mass-produce generic copies of drugs that are already commercially available just because you want to sell them cheaper. The FDA considers that manufacturing unapproved drugs.
Ah, I see. So if HIMS goes to the market and says, hey, we aren't selling generic Viagra, we are actually selling a custom mint-flavored chewable that combines hair loss medication and ED medication in a very specific dose just for you, then they are technically personalizing it.
Exactly. By heavily emphasizing that 70% of their revenue is personalized, they are building a legal defense in real time. They are arguing to the regulators, look, we aren't a mass manufacturer of copycat drugs. We are a digital platform connecting millions of unique individuals to custom pharmaceutical solutions.
Wrapping themselves in the flag of individual patient care.
Precisely. It is their primary defense against the accusation that they are operating a shadow pharmaceutical manufacturing ring.
It's a very clever distinction. But that brings us directly to the elephant in the room. The one thing that supercharged their revenue growth and is now literally threatening to blow up the entire operation. Section 2, the GLP-1 trap.
This right here is the critical strategic inflection point for the company. To understand the current crisis, you really have to understand the boom that caused it. HIMS rode the massive wave of the semaglutide shortage.
Semaglutide being the active ingredient in Ozempic and Wegovy.
Right. For a long time, as I'm sure you remember, you just couldn't get those drugs at a normal pharmacy. They were backordered everywhere. Novo Nordisk couldn't make the injection pens fast enough.
And when an FDA-approved drug is placed on the official national shortage list, compounding pharmacies are legally permitted to step in and make direct copies to fulfill the public health need.
Yes, they can buy the active ingredient, the API, from a supplier and mix it themselves. HIMS jumped on this loophole incredibly aggressively. Based on the financial forensics we've done on their reports, estimates suggest that compounded GLP-1s rapidly grew to represent somewhere between 25 and 30% of their total U.S. revenue.
That is a staggering chunk of change. We are talking hundreds of millions of dollars essentially appearing overnight because of a temporary regulatory loophole.
But the thing about loopholes is they eventually close. And for HIMS, the regulatory wall hit hard in February 2026. Specifically, on February 21st, 2025, the FDA officially removed semaglutide from the shortage list.
Meaning Novo Nordisk finally proved they had caught up with global production demands.
Right, and theoretically, the very moment that list is updated, the legal loophole closes. You have to immediately stop mass producing the compounded copies.
But looking at the timeline here, HIMS didn't stop.
No, they didn't. They attempted a very fast pivot to what regulatory lawyers call the 503A loophole.
503A. Okay, let's unpack that jargon for a second. What does 503A actually mean in practice?
Section 503A of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act allows for compounding if it is for an identified individual patient with a specific medical need. HIMS basically argued, okay, the national shortage is officially over, but we can still legally sell this semaglutide if we personalize it.
So they tweak the recipe.
Yeah, exactly. They said maybe we add a little vitamin B12 to the shot to help mitigate nausea, or we change the delivery mechanism. They claimed this tiny alteration made it a custom prescription, completely exempt from the shortage rules.
That feels incredibly risky. You are basically daring the FDA to call your bluff on a technicality.
It was an aggressive legal maneuver, but then they took it a massive step further, and this is where the infamous 48-hour pill debacle happened.
Oh man, looking at the timeline from the sources, this part is just chaotic. So it's early February 2026. The national shortage is over. HIMS is trying to keep this massive revenue gravy train rolling using the 503A argument. And on February 5th, they announce a compounded semaglutide pill.
A pill version for just $49 a month.
$49. But isn't the name brand injectable stuff from Novo Nordisk like $1,000 without insurance?
Easily, sometimes more. So HIMS comes out with this $49 pill. They are drastically undercutting the biggest pharma company on earth, using a compounded oral formula that has absolutely not gone through the standard decade-long FDA clinical trial approval process.
Talk about poking the bear.
They weren't just poking the bear, they walked into the bear's cave and stole its food. The reaction from the establishment was immediate and furious. FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary, who is known for being quite vocal and active on social media, posted directly on X.
Formerly Twitter.
Right. He posted that he would aggressively target illegal copycat drugs. He didn't use soft, bureaucratic language. He was very direct.
And Novo Nordisk didn't just tweet about it. They threatened immediate, overwhelming legal action.
And the broader stock market completely panicked. It was a strategic misstep of epic proportions for HIMS. On February 7th, just 2 days after loudly launching this miracle $49 pill, HIMS abruptly issued a statement announcing they were pulling the product.
They pulled the plug in just 48 hours.
Yes. The PR release cited constructive conversations with stakeholders.
Which is just classic corporate speak for, we got threatened by people powerful enough to shut our entire business down by Friday.
Precisely. It was a total disaster because it signaled to everyone, regulators, institutional investors, competitors, that HIMS was pushing the legal boundaries way, way too far.
And that leads us directly into the severe consequences.
Yeah.
Because you can't just unring that bell once the FDA is looking at you. Now, according to the SEC filings we were reviewing, they are facing a three-pronged legal attack.
Let's get into Section 3, legal forensics. We called it a three-pronged attack because it's coming from three entirely different jurisdictions. Attack Vector 1 is Novo Nordisk. They filed a massive lawsuit on February 9th, 2026 in Delaware.
And looking at the docket, this isn't just a basic cease and desist letter. This is a full-blown patent infringement suit.
Correct. They are specifically alleging infringement on U.S. patent 8,129,343. Novo is explicitly claiming in the filing that HIMS is selling inauthentic and untested knockoffs.
Knockoffs. That is a really harsh word to use in the tightly regulated pharmaceutical world.
It is meant to be highly damaging. Novo isn't just asking for a financial settlement here. They are seeking a permanent legal injunction. They want the federal court to order HIMS to permanently stop selling any semaglutide products whatsoever until that specific patent expires in 2031.
If the judge grants that injunction, 25 to 30% of HIMS' total revenue just evaporates instantly.
Gone overnight.
Yeah.
But Attack Vector 2 might actually be an even worse existential threat. This one involves the FDA and the Department of Justice.
The DOJ. Now we are talking about serious federal criminal investigations.
Yes. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services officially referred HIMS to the DOJ to investigate potential violations of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. The specific statutory charge they are investigating is misbranding.
Misbranding. To a layperson, that sounds like someone accidentally put the wrong barcode on a shipping box. But I assume in this context, it's vastly more serious.
Much, much more serious. The FDA had previously warned HIMS about using marketing phrases like clinically proven ingredients to describe their compounded drugs. You see, technically, legally speaking, compounded drugs are never FDA approved. They simply haven't gone through the massive double-blind clinical trials that brand-name blockbuster drugs go through.
Right, because they're supposed to be mixed on the spot for one person.
Exactly. So if you run ads saying your compounded copy is clinically proven, or you imply to the consumer that it is the exact same safety profile as actual Ozempic, the federal government considers that intentionally lying to the consumer, hence misbranding.
And there's a very intense political angle to this DOJ referral too, right? Because in the source materials, there's a letter from Senator Tom Cotton.
Yes, that is a critical piece of macro context. Senator Cotton wrote a formal letter to the FDA expressing deep concern about unregulated Chinese APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients entering the American healthcare supply chain. And he specifically pointedly named the weight loss sector in that letter.
Now, I want to be very clear for our listeners here. We are not taking a political stance or endorsing the viewpoints in the senator's letter. We are simply reporting that this letter exists in the source material, and it applies massive political pressure to the situation.
Right, we are just looking at the mechanics of the pressure. By bringing up the origin of the chemical ingredients, it ties this whole regulatory issue to national security and domestic safety. It frames the FDA crackdown not just as the government protecting Big Pharma's patent profits, but as the government protecting everyday American citizens from potentially dangerous, unverified foreign substances.
And when it gets framed as a national security issue, it becomes incredibly difficult for a consumer tech company like HIMS to fight back politically.
It really boxes them in.
And then, just to pile on to the misery, we have Attack Vector 3, the Securities and Exchange Commission.
The SEC. This was quietly revealed deep in their 10-K annual filing. The SEC Division of Enforcement is formally investigating HIMS' public statements and disclosures about compounded semaglutide.
So this isn't about whether the drugs are safe. This is the financial fraud angle.
Essentially, yes. The SEC doesn't care about the clinical efficacy of the drugs. They strictly care if HIMSs lied or misled their own investors. The core question is, did the executives tell shareholders, hey, this GLP-1 revenue stream is highly durable and totally legal, when they perhaps knew privately that the FDA was actively preparing to shut them down? Did they intentionally misrepresent the regulatory risk to keep the stock price up?
And looking at the market reaction in the charts here, institutional investors are clearly terrified. The stock has extended its losses to something like 52% year-to-date.
The uncertainty is just toxic for evaluation. You have a corporate patent suit that could kill the flagship product, a DOJ investigation that could bring actual criminal penalties for executives, and an SEC probe that could lead to massive financial fines. It is a three-front siege.
Okay, so the corporate lawyers are obviously working overtime. But what about the actual bank account? Let's move to Section 4, Financial Realities, because the hangover from this party is definitely arriving.
This is where we see the immediate real-world impact of all this legal noise in the accounting. Despite those fantastic 2025 full-year numbers we talked about at the top of the show, the forward-looking guidance for Q1 of 2026 was a massive shocker to Wall Street.
According to the transcripts, they guided for $600 million to $625 million in revenue for Q1 2026.
Which, out of context, sounds like a lot of money. But here's the massive problem. In Q4 of 2025, they just did $618 million.
So they're essentially guiding for flat or potentially even negative sequential growth.
Exactly. For a tech-valued company that was previously growing at 59% year over year, telling the market you are going to be flat quarter over quarter is an absolute disaster. It destroys the growth narrative.
What was the specific reason management gave for that sudden slowdown?
Management cited a $65 million headwind, and they specifically related it to, and I'm quoting here, changes in shipping cadences for weight loss products.
Changes in shipping cadences. I have to say, that sounds like a masterclass in corporate euphemisms.
It absolutely is. You have to ask yourself, what does changing a shipping cadence actually mean in the real world? It highly likely means they are intentionally slowing down sales, or perhaps pausing shipments entirely to certain strict states, or adding cumbersome medical verification steps to try and appease the federal regulators.
So it's a cover for a regulatory chilling effect. They're slamming on the brakes internally to avoid crashing into that legal wall we talked about.
That is exactly how the market interpreted it, and it's not just the top-line sales slowing down. They are also making significantly less money on the sales they do actually make. Gross margins compressed down to 72% in Q4.
And it was at 79% the prior year, right?
Right. That is a massive 700 basis point drop in margin. It tells us that the fundamental cost of operating this specific business line is skyrocketing. Fulfillment costs for weight loss are vastly higher than shipping a little bottle of hair pills. These are liquid injectables. They require expensive cold chain shipping, specialized packaging. Plus, they're spending huge amounts of capital trying to pivot the business away from the crisis.
But the CEO, Andrew Dudum, if you read his quotes in the earnings call, he sounds remarkably confident. He repeatedly claims the vast majority of their revenue is non-GLP-1. And he even said the core metabolic weight business is durable, even in a, his word, draconian scenario where compounded GLP-1s are totally banned by the government.
Look, he's the CEO. He has to say that to stop a bank run on his stock. His primary job right now is to project absolute confidence. And mathematically, technically, he is correct. If compounded GLP-1s make up 30% of revenue, then 70% is non-GLP-1. That is technically a majority.
Right.
But losing 30% of your top-line revenue literally overnight, there is no company on earth that just shrugs that off. That is a massive, gaping hole to fill in your cash flow. It changes the entire fundamental valuation of the enterprise.
So if you are the executive team at HIMS and the United States government is actively trying to shut down your biggest, most profitable growth engine, what is the play? You run, or at least you look for completely new territory. Which brings us to Section 5, the Great Escape Strategy.
This is perhaps the most fascinating strategic pivot they have made in response to the crisis. They are desperately trying to diversify away from the U.S. regulatory mess by aggressively acquiring international assets.
We have to talk about this Eucalyptus acquisition. The press release details are staggering.
It is a massive bet. They are acquiring Eucalyptus for up to $1.15 billion. For context on how big of a swing that is, HIMS only had about $450 million in actual cash and short-term investments on their balance sheet at the end of the year.
Wow. So what exactly is Eucalyptus?
Think of Eucalyptus as basically the HIMS and HERS of Australia. They are a massive digital health leader down there, and they also have established operational footprints in the UK, Germany, and interestingly, Japan.
Japan. That is a notoriously difficult market to crack for Western healthcare companies.
It is, but it's an international land grab strategy. Look at the data. HIMS rest of world revenue already surged 399% last year to $134 million. This acquisition is designed to pour absolute gasoline on that international fire. The strategic logic is pretty transparent. If the U.S. market is getting way too hot with the DOJ and the FDA, let's go buy immediate growth in overseas markets where we have a clean regulatory slate.
But isn't there an incredible amount of risk there? They are spending a massive chunk of their capital and structuring a deal that will likely heavily dilute their stock just to buy a company in foreign regulatory environments they don't know nearly as well.
The integration risk is off the charts. And the financial structure of the deal is highly complex. They are putting up about $240 million in upfront cash, but the rest is tied up in deferred payments and performance earnouts stretching all the way through 2029.
They are essentially mortgaging their corporate future to secure this immediate overseas growth.
They probably feel like they have absolutely no choice. They desperately need a story to tell Wall Street that isn't focused on U.S. weight loss lawsuits.
And speaking of aggressively changing the narrative, they're also trying to pivot what actual products they sell domestically, not just where they sell them. This is what they're calling the proactive care pivot.
Right. If the DOJ says you can't sell copycat weight loss drugs anymore, what else can you push through your massive subscriber network? They are betting the house on biomarker-driven care.
And this is where that smaller acquisition comes into play, a company called Your Bio.
Exactly. They bought Your Bio to move heavily into physical diagnostics. Instead of the old model, which was basically, fill out a quick online form and we mail you a generic pill, the new model is take this at-home lab test, let's physically check your hormone levels, let's measure your specific heart health markers.
So they are trying to move up the medical value chain, becoming more of a real clinic.
Yes. They are rapidly launching full-scale testosterone replacement therapy, comprehensive menopause support, complex longevity treatments. The long-term strategy is to transform into a holistic, data-driven health partner for the patient, rather than just being a convenient online pill dispenser.
And strategically, from a legal perspective, it is vastly harder for the FDA to crack down on a licensed doctor prescribing personalized hormone therapy based on actual blood lab results than it is to crack down on a factory mass-producing generic semaglutide injections.
Exactly. It looks, feels, and acts vastly more legitimate. The narrative shifts to We are treating your unique underlying biology, not just selling you a viral TikTok weight loss fad.
It seems like a much smarter, long-term foundational play. But the million-dollar question is, can they build out this complex diagnostic infrastructure fast enough to replace the hundreds of millions in revenue they are likely about to lose from the GLP-1 crackdown?
That is the race against the clock.
All right, so we have covered the blowout numbers, the terrifying lawsuits, the financial margin compression, and this massive international escape pivot. Let's try to land the plane for the listener here. Section 6, the final verdict. When you synthesize all of these sources, how should an investor or even just a healthcare industry observer look at HIMS and HERS right this second?
When you weigh the data, it lands squarely as a speculative hold, or a watch list name if you prefer.
Break down the bull and bear case for why it's a hold.
Well, look at the bull case first. The stock right now is historically incredibly cheap. It's currently trading at roughly 1.5 to 2 times forward sales. They still have over $1 billion in total liquidity if you include investments before the acquisition costs settle. And remember, the HERS business alone is basically a standalone unicorn growing at 100%. If the legal clouds somehow miraculously blow over, this stock could easily double or triple in value.
But the bear case is pretty terrifying.
The bear case is the classic Wall Street adage. It is cheap for a reason. The combined DOJ and SEC investigative overhang is a massive, suffocating black cloud. If the DOJ decides to formally file criminal charges, or if the SEC levels a crippling fine, or if Novo Nordisk actually wins that permanent sales injunction, the stock could face catastrophic dilution or drop to a fraction of its current value.
It really feels like binary gambling at this specific moment.
It is. Until there is absolute concrete clarity on the federal legal front, it is simply too dangerous to buy aggressively. But conversely, because that underlying core business, the non-GLP-1 subscriptions, is still growing so strong, it's arguably too cheap to short. So you sit on your hands. You watch the docket.
Risk defined. Portfolio protected. That has to be the mantra here.
Exactly. Management is attempting a spectacular corporate high-wire act right now. They are desperately trying to swap out their most controversial high-octane engine, the GLP-1s, for a completely new engine built on international expansion and personalized hormone diagnostics, all while the federal government is actively trying to cut the wire they are walking on.
The next 6 months, Q1 and Q2 of 2026, are absolutely going to determine if this company survives the compounding crisis intact.
It is going to be a fascinating masterclass in extreme corporate crisis management, one way or the other.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's deep dive. But before we sign off, we always like to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to chew on. Something that builds on the source material, but points to the bigger picture.
Yeah, my final question for you to think about is this. If HIMS and HERS is legally forced to stop compounding, and if the federal government successfully shuts down all of these cheaper telehealth alternatives, does that mean the brief era of affordable, accessible weight loss medication is officially over for the average American? Or are we just quietly resigning ourselves to a healthcare system where Big Pharma will always legally maneuver to win, keeping drug prices astronomically high and consumer competition artificially low?
That truly is the billion-dollar question for the entire industry. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to Griffonomics.
We will see you next time.